All right, let's do this. I don't know if y'all heard me, but I'm not gaming out tonight. I ain't doing anything. Just running it back. I forgot. I don't have a mic on the webcam. And anyways, we're not gonna do anything tonight. We're gonna watch this shit. I figured I'd bring it to you guys like live. I'm kicking back, tonight. We might switch it up and do some Call of Duty. Who knows? I might only watch 20, 30, 40 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours of this shit. I don't know. But I figured I'd just bring this to y'all and give y'all my like 2 cents while we watching along. I think it's pretty cool. I just really don't like Chris, you know, I say Chris Tucker, right? Ha. Tucker Carlson, I never liked him years ago, but he seemed to like turn around. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But I think Vladimir's dropping some truth bombs out here. Let's see if everybody. I don't know. Let's see if they're right.
The following is an interview with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, shot February 6, 2024, at about 7 p.m. in the building behind us, which is, of course, the Kremlin. The interview, as you will see if you watch it, is primarily about the war in progress, the war in Ukraine, how it started, what's happening, and most pressingly, how it might end. One note before you watch. At the beginning of the interview, we asked the most obvious question, which is, why did you do this? Did you feel a threat, an imminent physical threat? And that's your justification. And the answer we got shocked us. Putin went on for a very long time, probably half an hour, about the history of Russia going back to the 8th century. And honestly, we thought this was a filibustering technique and found it annoying and interrupted him several times. And he responded he was annoyed by the interruption. But we concluded in the end, for what it's worth, that it was not a filibustering technique. There was no time limit on the interview. We ended it after more than 2 hours. Instead, what you're about to see seemed to us sincere, whether you agree with it or not. Vladimir Putin believes that Russia has a historic claim to parts of Western Ukraine. So our opinion would be to view it in that light, as a sincere expression of what he thinks. And with that, here it is. Mr. President, thank you. On February 22nd, 2022, you addressed your country in a nationwide address when the conflict in Ukraine started. And you said that you were acting because you had come to the conclusion that the United States, through NATO, might initiate a, quote, surprise attack on our country.
Look, Vladimir
And
getting
to
all
American ears,
comfortable
that
as
sounds
hell. Thinking
paranoid. Tell us why you
that dropped
believe
his
the
cell
United States
phone,
might strike
his
Russia
watch.
out of the blue.
That nigga
How did
getting
you conclude
comfy.
that?
That nigga might as well throw up like a motherfucking foot sofa. You know what I'm saying?
It's not that America, the United States, was going to launch a surprise strike on Russia. I didn't say that. Are we having a talk show or a serious conversation?
Here's the quote.
That is pretty
Thank
funny.
you. It's a formidable serious
Так вот, да, это серьезный разговор. Но поскольку у вас базовое
Because your
образование...
basic education is in history, as far as I understand.
Yes.
Тогда я позволю себе...
So if you don't mind, I will take only 30 seconds or 1 minute to give you a short reference to history for giving you a little historical background.
Please.
Вот смотрите, с чего
Let's look where our relationship with Ukraine started from.
Откуда она взялась?
Where did Ukraine come from?
Российское государство стало
The
собираться
Russian state started gathering itself as a centralized statehood,
годом создания российского государства,
and it is considered to be the year of the establishment of the Russian state in 862,
Новгород на северо-западе страны.
when the townspeople of Novgorod invited a Varangian prince, Rurik, from Scandinavia to reign.
Варягов. 862 год. В 1800
In 1862, Russia celebrated the 1000th anniversary of its statehood,
своей государственности и в Новгороде.
and in Novgorod there is a memorial dedicated to the 1000th anniversary of the
В
country.
882 году
In 882, Rurik's successor, Prince Oleg, who was actually playing the role of regent at Rurik's younger son,
по сути, функция регента
because Rurik had died by that time, came to Kiev.
к этому времени пришел в Киев. отстранил от власти двух братьев,
He
Some
ousted two
random nigga
brothers
came to
who
Kiev,
apparently
nigga.
had
членами дружины Рюрик.
once
Scandinavian
been
ass
members of
blood.
Rurik's
I don't know.
squad.
You know that European shit is like so fucking.
So Russia began to develop with two centers of power,
It's literally
Kiev
like
and
so
Novgorod.
fucking. Look, it's so fucking. There's so many bloodlines and shit that used to run everything and shit like that it's like, like to get me to get us to go through the goddamn bloodline and figure it all out is like hell no.
Orthodoxy, or Eastern Christianity.
Централизованное российское государство.
From this time, the centralized Russian state began to strengthen. Why? Because of the single territory, integrated economic ties,
Один язык.
one and the same language, and, after the baptism of Russia, the same faith and rule of the prince. The centralized Russian state began to take shape.
Российское государство.
Well, we don't
Back
know
in
what
the
shape
Middle
that
Ages,
is, but
Prince
it began to
Yaroslav the
take shape.
Wise introduced the
I can see
order
why
of succession
like
to a
this
throne.
guy is like kind of skeptical, like I don't know, like when he
But after
first
he passed
interviewed,
away,
he's going on
it
this
became
history spiel, and
complicated
it
for
might
various
seem a little
reasons.
skeptical. I can see that, but I could listen.
The throne was passed not directly from father to eldest son, but from the prince, who had passed away to his brother, then to his sons in different lines.
Потом сыновьям по разным линиям. Все это привело к
All
раздору.
this led to the fragmentation and the end of Rus as a single state.
So the old kingdom from back in
There
the
was nothing
13,
special about
1200s
it.
split
The
up
same was happening
because of
then
this
in Europe.
bloodline.
Раздробленное русское государство стало легкой добычей.
But the fragmented Russian state became an easy prey to the empire created earlier by Genghis Khan.
Хан Батый пришли
Okay.
His
Yeah.
successors, namely Batu Khan,
see,
came to
you know, I
Rus,
remember this in
plundered
college
and
a
ruined
little
nearly
bit.
all the cities. The southern part, including Kiev, by the way, and some other cities, simply lost independence, while northern cities preserved some of their sovereignty.
Yeah, because like the upper part of Russia is like
They
really
had to
cold.
pay tribute to the horde, but they
So I can
managed
see
to
like these
preserve
niggas
some
from
part of
China
their
and
sovereignty.
shit, Mongolia, they come up north, but they're like, fuck,
And
that's
then
too
a
north.
unified
Let's just
Russian
ride the
state
line
began
and
to
go all
take
the way,
shape
and there's
with
Europe.
its center in Moscow.
Оно
see
начало
The southern part of Russian lands, including Kiev,
к тому центру, который складывался.
began to gradually gravitate towards another magnet, the center that was emerging in Europe.
Его даже называли Литовско-Русским.
This was the Grand Duchy of Lithuania.
Составляли значительную
It was even called the Lithuanian-Russian Duchy,
Okay,
because
so
Russians were a
Lithuania.
significant part of this population.
славными.
They spoke the old Russian language
In
and were
Lithuania, like below
Orthodox.
Poland, right here.
Великое
You're
княжество
like,
Литовское.
okay,
But
wait.
then there was a unification,
Norway,
the union of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom
Sweden
of
and
Poland.
shit.
Уже в
Finland.
духовности
A few years
Right.
later, another union was signed,
священников подчинилась
And
власти.
then
But
there's
this
like
time
this little
already in
Russian
the
piece. I
religious
forgot the
sphere.
damn name.
Таким образом,
I'm
вот
just
эти
gonna, it's
земли-
Some
gonna
of
get
the
me.
Orthodox priests became
And
subordinate to
then
the
down
Pope.
here, I know Poland's right
Thus,
here. There's
these
two
lands
little countries,
became part of the
Estonia,
Polish-Lithuanian state.
and like
Полячьи
Finland or
были
Sweden
этой части населения.
up here.
Язык внедряли туда свой.
During decades, the Poles were engaged in Polonization of this part of the
Как
population.
они живут у края,
They introduced
Estonia
their
is near
language there,
Poland, so I
tried to
can see
entrench the
that.
idea that this population was not exactly
They're like right
Russian,
beside each other.
that because they
Fucking
lived
pull up
on
the
the
map.
fringe,
Should I
they
pull
were
up- should I pull the map up?
Ukrainians.
занимается
Originally, the word Ukrainian meant that a person was living on the outskirts of the state, along
Them
the
country
fringes,
niggas.
or was engaged in a border
That's what
patrol
that
service.
shit. Ukraine
It
means
didn't mean
country
any
niggas.
particular ethnic
They
group.
Russian country niggas.
So the
That's
Poles
what it
were
mean.
trying to,
относились
That's
in every
hilarious.
possible way, to colonize this part of the Russian lands, and actually treated it rather harshly, not to say cruelly. All that led
So
to
he's
the
saying
fact
back in the
that
day,
this part
Poland
of
was
the
treating
Russian lands
these
began to struggle for their
Ukrainians,
rights.
these border people, these
They wrote letters
outsiders,
to Warsaw,
not
demanding
outsiders,
that
like
their
really
rights be
bad.
observed, and people be commissioned here, including to Kiev.
I beg your pardon, can you tell us what period? I'm losing track of where in history we are.
So you need to go lay
Это
down.
было-
The
это-
Polish
это
oppression
было
of
в 13
Ukraine.
веке. Это было
It was in the
в
13th century.
14 веке. Ну вот, в 13 веке. Это было в 13 веке. Значит, и...
Now I will tell you what happened later,
Hold on, Bubba, we're watching the screen.
Не было путаницы.
and give the dates so that there is no confusion.
В 1600...
And in 1654, even a bit earlier,
чуть раньше даже, люди, которые контролировали
The
власть,
people who were in control of the authority over
обращаясь в
that part of
Варшаву
the Russian
с
lands
требованием, чтобы присылали к ним направление
addressed Warsaw, I repeat, demanding that they send them to rulers of Russian origin and Orthodox faith. When Warsaw did not answer them, and in fact rejected their demands, they turned to Moscow so that
So
Moscow
the
took
border
them away.
people that split up
Чтобы,
because of the
вы не думали, что я
freaking
что-то придумал?
whatnot
So
because
that you
the
don't think that I'm
Mongols.
inventing things.
Okay, now they come back together and they're like already trying to form their state,
I'll
and
give
now
you
they're
these
saying
documents.
that they
Well,
asked
it
Poland,
doesn't sound like
who
you're inventing
treated
it.
them
I'm not
really bad,
sure
for
why
help,
it's relevant to what happened 2 years ago.
and then that didn't work.
But still,
Документы из архива.
these are documents from the
So they
archives,
asked
copies.
Moscow for help. What?
Here are the letters from Bogdan
So
Khmelnytsky,
like these Ukrainians, he
the
just
man who then
described the
controlled the
word
power
is
in
like
this part
all
of the Russian
border
lands.
people,
В Варшаву.
and these
That
border
is now
people
called
are the
Ukraine.
edge of the
He wrote to
state
Warsaw
people.
demanding that
It
their
wasn't
rights
even
be
a people.
upheld.
It was a term
And
meant
after
for
being
these people that
refused,
are
he
so
began to
far
write
out.
letters
Country
to
niggas.
Moscow,
It was like
asking
y'all
to
niggas
take
is
them
out there in
under
the
the
country.
strong hand of the
Y'all's
Moscow Tsar.
Ukrainians.
There are
You're
copies
outside
of
of
these
the border.
documents. I will leave them for your good memory.
Bubba,
There is a
you don't even know what I'm
translation
talking
into
about. We're talking
Russian.
about Russia.
You can translate it into
Listen,
English later.
Потому что
Russia
so,
would not agree to admit
these
them
same
straight
Negroes,
away, assuming that
hundreds of
the
years
war
later,
with Poland would start.
started
Nevertheless,
asking
in
Warsaw, Poland,
1654, the
for help.
Pan-Russian Assembly of top clergy and landowners, headed by the Tsar,
часть древнерусских земель вошла
which was the representative body of the power of the old Russian state, decided to include a part of the old Russian lands into Moscow Kingdom.
перемирие было заключено.
As expected, the war with Poland began.
Этого
It lasted 13
Because
years,
them
and
niggas
then in
asked Poland for
1654,
help way back when, the outsiders,
truce
the
was concluded.
Ukrainians, the edge niggas, the country bumpkin motherfuckers.
and 32 years later, I think, a peace treaty with Poland,
Which is weird because
they
you would
called
think all of
Eternal
Russia is
Peace,
country.
was signed.
You know what I'm saying?
отошла к России.
And these lands, the whole left bank of Dnieper, including Kiev, went to Russia.
Затем во времена
And the whole right bank of Dnieper remained in
Россия
Poland.
вернула все исторические земли.
Under the rule of Catherine the Great, Russia reclaimed all of its
So they're
historical
talking about
lands,
that, like the
including in
current
the south and
Ukrainian
west.
Polish
Да,
border.
вот
This all lasted until the revolution.
воспользовавшись
Before World War I,
организацией,
Austrian General
Russian
Staff
Revolution.
relied on the ideas of Ukrainianization and started actively promoting the ideas of Ukraine and the Ukrainianization.
в преддверии мировой войны, конечно, было стремление ослабить потенциал.
Their motive was obvious.
Было стремление
Just before World War I, they wanted to weaken the potential enemy and secure themselves favorable conditions in the border area. So the idea which had emerged in Poland that people residing in that territory were allegedly not really Russians, but rather belonged to a special ethnic group, Ukrainians, started being propagated by the Austrian General Staff.
которые говорили необходимо
As far back as the 19th
So
century,
he's claiming because of
theorists
the back
calling
in the
for
day
Ukrainian
when
independence
these
appeared.
country niggas,
независимости
country,
All those, however, claimed that Ukraine should
Russian
have
people,
a
the
very
border
good relationship
people,
with Russia.
which was nicknamed
They
Ukrainians,
insisted
the
on that.
outsiders, the border people, the people on the edge
After
of
the
the
1917
government
revolution,
state,
старались восстановить,
acquired help from fucking Warsaw.
развернулась гражданская
the Bolsheviks
And
sought
because
to
of all
restore the
that, years
statehood, and
later-
the civil war began, including the hostilities with Poland.
вплоть в 1920
These
году.
people in Europe decided that Ukrainians
In
are kind of a
1921,
thing.
peace with Poland was proclaimed,
because of
and
all
under
that.
that treaty, the right bank of Dnieper River once
So he's
again was
claiming
given back
that
to Poland.
Technically, Ukrainians are like, that's just a nickname for
In
the people on the
1939,
edge
after
of the
Poland
state,
cooperated with
the border
Hitler,
people.
С Гитлером, а Польша сотрудничала.
it did
You know,
collaborate with Hitler.
And
you know?
he's saying that it's,
Hitler offered
I can
Poland
kinda
peace
see where
and a
he's getting
treaty of
at.
friendship,
В архивах есть.
I don't know. It'd be like,
С Польшей
an
I gotta
alliance
tread softly, but it'd
demanding
be
in
like,
return that Poland give back to Germany
the US Virgin
so-called
Islands.
Danzig corridor,
I
which
guess,
connected
right?
the bulk of
it
Germany
ain't
with
ours,
East Prussia and
but it's ours
Königsberg.
now.
Основную часть Германии с,
I don't know.
с
I don't
Königsbergом,
know. I
да,
couldn't find a
и
thought right away
с Восточной
fast enough.
Пруссией.
After World War
Too
I,
much
this
information
territory
going
was
on.
transferred to Poland, and instead of Danzig, a city of Gdansk emerged.
И вместо Данцига появился.
Hitler asked them to give it amicably, but they refused.
Of course.
Still, they collaborated with Hitler and engaged together
That's the first time that nigga
in
even
the
said
partitioning
anything.
of Czechoslovakia.
He's like, of course.
May I ask you,
That's the
you're
first time I
making the
heard him
case
say
that,
anything I
that
know
Ukraine,
about.
certainly parts of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, is in effect Russia has been for hundreds of years. Why wouldn't you just
back,
take it
Bubba.
when you became president 24 years ago? You have nuclear weapons, they don't. If it's actually your land, why did you wait so long?
Ща- Да, щас
I'll
скажу.
tell you.
Я щас к этому-
I'm
я
coming to
заканчиваю
that.
эту историческую справку.
This briefing is coming to an end. It might be boring, but it
not
explains
boring.
many
I
things.
just don't know how it's relevant.
Ну, отлично, тогда мне очень
Good.
приятно, что вы так это оценили.
Good.
Спасибо большое.
I'm so
Итак,
gratified that you appreciate that.
После,
Thank you.
перед Второй мировой
So,
войной,
before
Okay, so
World
they
War
was
II,
like, hey,
Poland
look,
collaborated with
you
Hitler,
talking about
and
something,
although it did not
but-
yield to Hitler's demands, it still participated in the partitioning of Czechoslovakia together with Hitler, as the Poles had not given the Danzig corridor to Germany
Get out of here.
and went too far, pushing Hitler to start World War II by attacking them.
9-го года именно с-
Why was it Poland against whom the war started on 1st September 1939?
реализации его планов
Poland turned out to be uncompromising, and Hitler had nothing to do but start implementing his plans with Poland.
и Советский Союз
By the way, the USSR, I have read some archive documents, behaved very honestly.
свои войска на помощь Чехословакии.
It asked Poland's permission to transit its troops through the Polish territory to help Czechoslovakia.
Было сказано, что если даже советские
But
самолеты
the then Polish foreign minister said that if the Soviet planes flew over Poland, they would be downed over the territory of Poland.
война началась,
But that
и
doesn't
теперь
matter.
уже сама
What matters
Польша
is that the
стала
war
жертвой
began,
той
and
политики,
Poland
которую
fell prey to
проводила
the policies it had pursued against Czechoslovakia, as under the well-known Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
территории, отошла
Part of the territory, including western Ukraine, was to be given to Russia.
под названием Советский
Thus, Russia, which was then named the USSR, regained its historical lands.
победы
After the victory in the Great Patriotic War, as we call World War
World War
II,
II.
территории окончательно были
all those territories were ultimately enshrined as belonging to Russia,
Польша
to the USSR.
при этой компенсации, так надо полагать,
As for
получила
Poland,
Запад,
it received, apparently in compensation, the lands which had originally been German.
это, вот западная, восточную часть
The eastern parts of Germany,
земли.
these are now western lands of Poland.
Сегодня. Ну, естественно, и опять вернули
Of course, Poland regained access to the Baltic Sea and Danzig,
Данциг, который опять стал называться.
which was once again given its Polish name.
Вот таким образом сложилось
So this was how this situation
при
developed.
формировании Советского Союза, это уже 1900
In 1922, when the USSR was being established,
большевики начали формировать
the
СССР.
Bolsheviks started building the USSR and established the Soviet Ukraine, which had never existed before.
Right.
Который до сих пор вообще не существовал. При этом Сталин
Stalin insisted that those republics be included in the USSR as
входили в качестве автономных образований.
autonomous entities.
Основатель советского государства Ленин настоял.
For some inexplicable reason, Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state, insisted that they be entitled to withdraw from the USSR.
Наделил
And
образующуюся
again, for some unknown reasons, he transferred to that newly established Soviet Republic of Ukraine some of the lands together with people living there, even though those lands had never been called Ukraine, and yet they were made part of that Soviet Republic of Ukraine. Those lands included the Black Sea region, which was received under Catherine the Great,
никогда.
and which had no historical connection with Ukraine whatsoever.
Вернемся в 1654
Even if we go as far back as 1654, when these lands returned to Russian Empire, that territory was the size of 3 to 4 regions of modern Ukraine, with no Black Sea region. That was completely out of the question.
In 1654.
Exactly.
I'm just, you obviously have encyclopedic knowledge of this region, but why didn't you make this case for the first 22 years as president that Ukraine wasn't a real country?
Да, итак, значит, советская Украина получила
The Soviet Union was given a great deal of territory that had never belonged to it, including the Black Sea region.
Когда Россия их получила в результате
At some point, when Russia received them as an outcome of the Russo-Turkish Wars,
Белоруссии.
they were called New Russia or Novorossiya.
Ленин основатель
But that does not matter. What matters is that Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state,
И вот это все
established Ukraine that way.
в составе СССР
For decades, the Ukrainian Soviet Republic developed as part of the USSR,
по непонятным причинам занимались
and for unknown reasons again, the Bolsheviks were engaged in Ukrainianization. It was not merely because the Soviet leadership was composed to a great extent of those originating from Ukraine.
Украины и других
Rather, it was explained by the general policy of indigenization pursued by the Soviet Union. Same things were done in other Soviet republics. This involved promoting national languages and national cultures, which is not bad in principle. That is how the Soviet Ukraine was created. After the World War II, Ukraine received, in addition to the lands that had belonged to Poland before the war, part of the lands that had previously belonged to Hungary and Romania. So Romania and Hungary had some of their lands taken away and given to the Soviet Ukraine, and they still remain part of Ukraine. So in this sense, we have every reason to affirm that Ukraine is an artificial state that was shaped at Stalin's will.
Do you believe Hungary has a right to take its land back from Ukraine?
Oh,
And that other nations have a
so
right to go
so
back
he's
to their
saying after all that
1654
jazz
borders?
in the bag of chips, that Stalin created like this Ukraine
Я не
area.
знаю, как границам.
I'm not sure whether they should
But
go
it's
back to
technically
the
still Russia, but he
1654
made this
borders.
Все считают,
area
что,
because it still had
But given
parts
Stalin's
of Romania
time,
and
so-called
and-
Stalin's
and-
regime,
and
which
some other
as many
country, you
claim
just said,
saw
I
numerous
forgot,
violations of human
that-
rights
that
and
Ukraine still
violations
has
of the
part
rights
those
of other
countries'
states.
territories.
В
So
этом смысле,
it's like illegitimate
конечно,
because
вполне
that's
можно,
why
э,
Stalin made it
если
the
не говорить о том,
thing.
что они имеют на это
But-
право.
One may say that they could claim back those lands of theirs while having no right to do that. It is at least understandable.
Have you told Viktor Orban that he can have part of Ukraine?
Никогда не говорил.
Never. I have never told him, not a single time.
У нас с ним даже на этот счет не было никаких разговоров. Но мне достоверно
We have not even had any conversation on that, but I actually know for sure that Hungarians who live there
они, конечно, хотят вернуться.
Gotta grab the kid.
wanted to
BRB.
get back to their historical land.
Интересную историю, отвлекусь.
Moreover, I would like to share a very interesting story with you.
Значит, где-то в начале
I digress, it's a personal one.
из,
Somewhere in the early 80s, I went on a road trip in a car from then Leningrad across the Soviet Union through Kiev,
въехал
made a stop in Kiev, and then went to western Ukraine.
название
I
города.
went to the town of Beregovoye,
И
and all the names of towns and villages there were in Russian and in a language I did not understand, in Hungarian, in Russian and in Hungarian,
возле
not in Ukrainian, in Russian and in Hungarian. I was driving through some kind of village and there were men sitting next to the houses and they were wearing black three-piece suits and black cylinder hats. I asked, are they some kind of entertainers? I was told, no, they were not entertainers, they're Hungarians. I said, what are they doing here? What do you mean? This is their land, they live here. This was during the Soviet time in the 1980s. They preserved the Hungarian language, Hungarian names, and all their national costumes. They are Hungarians and they feel themselves to be Hungarians. And of course, when now there is an infringement,
Well, that is, and there's a lot of that, though. I think many nations are upset about Transylvania as well, as you obviously know. But many nations feel frustrated by the redrawn borders of the wars of the 20th century and wars going back 1,000 years, the ones that you mentioned. But the fact is that you didn't make this case in public until 2 years ago, February. And in the case that you made, which I read today,
Сейчас скажу.
you explain at great length that you felt a physical threat from the West in NATO, including potentially a nuclear threat, and that's what got you to move. Is that a fair characterization of what you said?
Я понимаю, что поскольку мои длинные диалоги, они
I understand that my long speeches probably fall outside of the genre of the interview. That is why I asked you at the beginning, Are we going to have a serious talk or a show?
Так что не
You
обижайтесь на меня,
said a serious talk.
Ну так вот,
So bear with me,
подошли
please.
к тому моменту, когда
We're coming to the point where the Soviet Ukraine was established.
1991 год.
Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed,
Получила в подарок от
and
России.
everything that Russia had generously bestowed on Ukraine was dragged away by the
В
latter.
целом, вот я подхожу сейчас к очень важному
I'm
моменту.
coming to a
Сегодняшний
very important point of today's agenda.
Этот развал Советского Союза.
Thank you.
After all, the collapse of the Soviet Union was effectively initiated by the Russian
Я не
leadership.
знаю, чем тогда руководствовалось руководство России. Но
I do not
подозреваю,
understand what the Russian leadership was guided by at the time, but I
э,
suspect there were
несколько
several reasons to think everything would be fine.
Первое. Ну, во-первых, я думаю, что руководство России исходило из того, что
First,
фундаментальные
I think that then Russian leadership believed that the fundamentals of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine were, in fact, a common language. More than 90% of the population there spoke Russian.
у каждого третьего какие-то родственные связи.
Family ties. Every third person there had some kind of family or friendship ties. Common culture, common history. Finally, common faith, coexistence with a single state for centuries, and deeply interconnected economies.
Экономика очень сильно взаимосвязана.
All of these were so fundamental. All these elements together make our good relationships inevitable.
Я хочу, чтобы вы, как американские граждане, чтобы
The second point is a very important one.
прежнее российское руководство
I want you, as an American citizen, and your viewers to hear about this as well.
больше никаких разделителей.
The former Russian leadership assumed that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist, and therefore there were no longer any ideological dividing lines.
Инициативно пошла даже на развал Советского Союза.
Russia even agreed voluntarily and proactively to the collapse of the Soviet Union,
Называемым
and believed that this would be understood by the so-called civilized West as an invitation for cooperation and
вот чего
association.
ожидала Россия.
That is what Russia was expecting, both from the United States and the so-called collective West as a whole.
В том числе и в Германии. Эгон Барр.
There were smart people, including in Germany,
I gotta find
Egon
it
Barr,
real quick.
a major politician of the Social Democratic Party, who insisted in his personal conversations with the Soviet leadership on the brink of the collapse of the Soviet Union that a new security system should be established in Europe.
Помочь объединиться Германии, но
Help should be given to unify Germany,
будет входить Соединенные
but a
Штаты,
new
Канада.
system should be also established to include the United States, Canada, Russia, and other Central European
Ну, чтобы
countries.
НАТО распространялось.
Yes.
But
Он
NATO
тогда говорил,
needs
если
not
НАТО
to
будет
expand.
распространяться, все будет то же
That's
самое,
what he
как
said.
в условиях холодной войны. Только
If
ближе к
NATO
границам
expands, everything would be just the same as during the Cold War,
Его никто не
only closer to Russia's borders.
Никто
That's
не
all.
послушал. Больше того, он рассердился как-то.
He was a wise old man, but no one listened to
Если,
him.
говорит, вы меня не
In
слушаете,
fact,
я больше
he
вас
got angry once.
рассердился на советское руководство.
If, he said, you don't listen to me, I'm never setting my foot in Moscow once again.
Но, тем не менее,
Everything happened just as he had said.
Well, of course, it did come true, and you've mentioned this many times. I think it's a fair point, and many in America thought that relations between Russia and the United States would be fine with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. That the opposite happened, but you've never explained why you think that happened, except to say that the West fears a strong Russia, but we have a strong China. The West does not seem very afraid of. What about Russia? Do you think convinced policymakers they had to take it down?
Запад боится сильного Китая больше, чем сильной России.
The West is afraid of strong China more than it fears a strong Russia, because Russia has 150 million people and China has 1.5 billion population, and its economy is growing by leaps and bounds, or 5% a year. It used to be even more. But that's enough for China. As Bismarck once put it, potentials are the most important. China's potential is enormous. It is the biggest economy in the world today in terms of purchasing power parity and the size of the economy. It has already overtaken the United States quite a long time ago, and it is growing at a rapid clip. Let's not talk about who is afraid of whom. Let's not reason in such terms. And let's get into the fact that after 1991, when Russia expected that it would be welcomed into the brotherly family of civilized nations, nothing like this happened. You tricked us. I don't mean you personally when I say you. Of course, I'm talking about the United States. The promise was that NATO would not expand eastward, but it happened 5 times. There were 5 waves of expansion. We tolerated all that. We were trying to persuade them. We were saying, please don't. We are as bourgeois now as you are. We are market economy and there is no communist party power. Let's negotiate. Moreover, I have also said this publicly before. There was a moment when a certain rift started growing between us. Before that, Yeltsin came to the United States. Remember, he spoke in Congress and said the good words. God bless America. Everything he said were signals. Let us in. Remember the developments in Yugoslavia before the Yeltsin was lavished with praise? As soon as the developments in Yugoslavia started, he raised his voice in support of Serbs, and we couldn't but raise our voices for Serbs in their defense. I understand that there were complex processes underway there, I do, but Russia could not help raising its voice in support of Serbs, because Serbs are also a special and close to us nation, with Orthodox culture and so on. It's a nation that has suffered so much for generations. Well, regardless, what is important is that Yeltsin expressed his support. What did the United States do? In violation of international law and the UN Charter, it started bombing Belgrade. It was the United States that let the genie out of the bottle. Moreover, when Russia protested and expressed its resentment, what was said? The UN Charter and international law have become obsolete. Now everyone invokes international law, but at that time they started saying that everything was outdated. Everything had to be changed. Indeed, some things need to be changed, as the balance of power has changed. It's true, but not in this manner. Yeltsin was immediately dragged through the mud, accused of alcoholism, of understanding nothing, of knowing nothing. He understood everything, I assure you. Well, I became president in 2000. I thought, okay, the Yugoslav issue is over, but we should try to restore relations. Let's reopen the door that Russia had tried to go through. And moreover, I said it publicly, I can reiterate. At a meeting here in the Kremlin with the outgoing President Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him, Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, you know, it's interesting. I think so. But in the evening, when we met for dinner, he said, you know, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible now. You can ask him. I think he will watch our interview. He'll confirm it. I wouldn't have said anything like that if it hadn't happened. Okay.
Were you
It's
sincere?
impossible now.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was,
But if he had said yes, would you have joined NATO?
if he had said yes, the process of rapprochement would have commenced, and eventually it might have happened if we had seen some sincere wish on the other side of our partners. But it didn't happen. Well, no means no. Okay, fine.
Why do you think that is? Just to get to motive, I know you're clearly bitter about it. I understand. But why do you think the West rebuffed you then? Why the hostility? Why did the end of the Cold War not fix the relationship? What motivates this from your point of view?
You said I was bitter about the answer. No, it's not bitterness. It's just a statement of fact. We're not bride and groom, bitterness, resentment. It's not about those kind of matters in such circumstances. We just realized we weren't welcome there, that's all. Okay, fine. But let's build relations in another manner. Let's look for common ground elsewhere. Why we received such a negative response, you should ask your leaders. I can only guess why. Too big a country with its own opinion and so on. And the United States, I've seen how issues are being resolved in NATO. I will give you another example now concerning Ukraine. The US leadership exerts pressure, and all NATO members obediently vote, even if they do not like something. Now, I'll tell you what happened in this regard with Ukraine in 2008, although it's being discussed. I'm not going to open a secret to you, say anything new. Nevertheless, after that we tried to build relations in different ways. For example, the events in the Middle East, in Iraq. We were building relations with the United States in a very soft, prudent, cautious manner. I repeatedly raised the issue that the United States should not support separatism or terrorism in the North Caucasus. But they continue to do it anyway. And political support, information support, financial support, even military support came from the United States and its satellites for terrorist groups in the Caucasus. I once raised this issue with my colleague, also the President of the United States. He says, "It's impossible. Do you have proof?" I said, "Yes." I was prepared for this conversation, and I gave him that proof. He looked at it, and you know what he said? I apologize, but that's what happened. I'll quote. He says, "Well, I'm gonna kick their ass." We waited and waited for some response. There was no reply. I said to the FSB director, "Write to the CIA, what is the result of the conversation with President?" He wrote once, twice, and then we got a reply. We have the answer in the archive. The CIA replied, "We have been working with the opposition in Russia. We believe that this is the right thing to do, and we will keep on doing it." Just ridiculous. Well, okay. We realized that it was out of the question.
Forces in opposition to you. So you're saying the CIA is trying to overthrow your government.
Ну, конечно, имелось в виду в данном
Of
случае.
course, they meant in
I
that
mean,
particular
I can
case
see
the
that. I can
separatists,
see how
the
they
terrorists
could-
who
they
fought
could be
with us in the
thinking.
Caucasus.
Они их называли.
That's who they called the opposition.
Это вот второй момент.
I mean,
This
listening
is
to
the
the whole
second
history
point.
background and what's going on, it
The
seems
third
like,
moment
you
is
know,
a very important one.
it seems
is
like,
the moment
you know,
when the
he's just
US
trying to
missile
defend
defense
Russia,
system
but,
was
I mean,
created.
what president wouldn't
Начало.
defend
The beginning.
Russia, you
Мы долго
know?
уговаривали.
Or
We
any
persuaded
other
for a
country
long
in the world,
time not to
right?
do it in the United States.
Меня пригласили в
Moreover,
отец Буша
after was invited by Bush Jr.'s father, Bush Sr., to visit his place on the ocean,
Там состоялась очень серьезная беседа,
I had a very serious conversation with President Bush and his team.
чтобы
I proposed that the United States, Russia, and Europe jointly create a missile defense system that, we believe,
которая, как мы считаем,
if created unilaterally, threatens our security, despite the fact that the United States officially said that it was being created against missile threats from Iran. That was the justification for the deployment of the missile defense system. I suggested working together, Russia, the United States, and Europe. They said it was very interesting. They asked me, "Are you serious?" I said, "Absolutely."
May I ask, what year was this?
Ну, я не помню. Вот
I don't remember.
в интернете, когда я был.
It is easy to find out on the internet when I was in the USA at the invitation of Bush Sr. It is even easier to learn from someone I'm going to tell you about.
Мне сказали, это очень интересно.
I was told it was very interesting. I said, just imagine if we could tackle such a global strategic security challenge together. The world will change. We'll probably have disputes, probably economic and even political ones, but we could drastically change the situation in the world. He says yes, and asks, "Are you serious?" I said, "Of course. We need to think about it," I'm told.
Вот в этот кабинет.
I said, "Go ahead, please." Then Secretary of Defense Gates, former director of CIA, and Secretary of State Rice came in here, in this cabinet, right here at this table. They sat on this table. Me, the foreign minister, the Russian defense minister on that side.
Министр обороны.
They said to me, Yes, we have thought about it. We agree. I said, thank God, great, but with some exceptions.
So twice you've described US presidents making decisions and then being undercut by their agency heads. So it sounds like you're describing a system that's not run by the people who were elected in your telling.
Именно так.
That's right, that's right. In the end, they just told us to get lost. I'm not going to tell you the details because I think it's incorrect. After all, it was confidential conversation. But our proposal was declined. That's a fact.
Confidential.
It was right then when I said, look, but then we will be forced to take countermeasures. We will create such strike systems that will certainly overcome missile defense systems. The answer was, we are not doing this against you, and you do what you want, assuming that it is not against us, not against the United States. I said, okay. Very well. That's the way it went. And we created hypersonic systems with intercontinental range, and we continue to develop them. We are now ahead of everyone, the United States and the other countries, in terms of the development of hypersonic strike systems, and we are improving them every day. But it wasn't us. We proposed to go the other way, and we were pushed back. Now, about NATO's expansion to the east. Well, we were promised no NATO to the east, not an inch to the east, as we were told. And then what? They said, well, it's not enshrined on paper, so we'll expand. So there were 5 waves of expansion, the Baltic states, the whole of Eastern Europe, and so on. And now I come to the main thing. They have come to the Ukraine, ultimately. In 2008, at the summit in Bucharest, they declared that the doors for Ukraine and Georgia to join NATO were open. Now about how decisions are made there. Germany, France seem to be against it, as well as some other European countries. But then, as it turned out later, President Bush, and he's such a tough guy, a tough politician, as I was told later, he exerted pressure on us and we had to agree. It's ridiculous, it's like kindergarten. Where are the guarantees? What kindergarten is this? What kind of people are these? Who are they? You see, they were pressed, they agreed. And then they say, Ukraine won't be in the NATO, you know? I say, I don't know. I know you agreed in 2008. Why won't you agree in the future? Well, they pressed us then. I say, why won't they press you tomorrow? And you'll agree again. Well, it's nonsensical. Who's there to talk to? I just don't understand. We're ready to talk. But with whom? Where are the guarantees?
So he's
None.
saying he's just been getting the
So they started to
brush
develop
yard,
the
like,
territory
this
of
whole
Ukraine.
time.
Whatever is there, I have told you the background, how this territory developed, what kind of relations there were with Russia. Every second or third person there has always had some ties with Russia. And during the elections, in already independent, sovereign Ukraine, which gained its independence as a result of the Declaration of Independence, and by the way, it says that Ukraine is a neutral state, and in 2008, suddenly the doors or gates to NATO were open to it. Oh, come on. This is not how we agreed. Now, all the presidents that have come to power in Ukraine, they relied on electorate with a good attitude to Russia in one way or the other. This is the southeast of Ukraine. This is a large number of people. And it was very difficult to dissuade this electorate, which had a positive attitude towards Russia. Viktor Yanukovych came to power, and how? The first time he won after President Kuchma, they organized a third round, which is not provided for in the constitution of Ukraine. This is a coup d'etat. Just imagine, someone in the United States wouldn't like the outcome.
In 2014?
Before that. No, this was before that. After President Kuchma, Viktor Yanukovych won the elections. However, his opponents did not recognize that victory. The US supported the opposition, and the third round was scheduled. What is this? This is a coup.
назначили третий тур.
The US supported it, and the winner of the third round came to power.
Это государственный переворот.
Imagine if in the US something was not to someone's liking, and the third round of election, which the US Constitution does not provide for, was organized.
Организовали третий.
Nonetheless, it was done in Ukraine.
Не предусмотрено.
Okay, Viktor Yushchenko, who was considered a pro-Western politician, came to power.
Виктор Ющенко, который считался прозападным.
Fine, we have built relations with him as well. He came to Moscow with visits. We visited Kiev. I visited too.
Встречались неформально.
We met in an informal setting. If he's pro-Western, so be it. It's fine. Let people do their job.
Пускай
The
ситуация
situation should have developed inside the independent Ukraine itself. As a result of Kuchma's leadership, things got worse and Viktor Yanukovych came to power after all.
ситуация ухудшилась.
Maybe he wasn't the best president and politician, I don't know. I don't want to give assessments. However, the issue of the association with the EU came up.
Но встал вопрос об ассоциации с Евросоюзом.
We have always been lenient to this, suit yourself. But when we read through the Treaty of Association, it turned out to be a problem for us, since we had a free trade zone and open customs borders with Ukraine, which under this association had to open its borders for Europe, which could have led to flooding of our
Свои
market.
границы перед Европой. И потоком все на наш рынок.
We said, no, this is not going to work.
Закроем тогда свои границы с Украиной.
We shall close our borders with Ukraine then. The customs borders, that is.
Начал считать.
Yanukovych started to calculate how much Ukraine was going to gain, how much to lose, and said to his European partners, I need more time to think before signing. The moment he said that, the opposition began to take destructive steps which were supported by the West. It all came down to Maidan and a coup in Ukraine.
So he did more trade with Russia than with the EU. Ukraine did.
Ну, конечно. Ну, конечно, конечно.
Of course. It's not even the matter of trade volume, although for the most part it is. It is the matter of cooperation ties, which the entire Ukrainian economy was based on. The cooperation ties between the enterprises were very close since the times of the Soviet Union. One enterprise there used to produce components to be assembled both in Russia and Ukraine and vice versa. They used to be very close ties.
Нам из Соединенных
A
Штатов
coup d'etat was committed, although I shall not delve into details now, as I find doing it inappropriate, the US told us.
оппозицию
Calm Yanukovych down, and we will calm the opposition.
по пути
Let the situation unfold in the scenario of a political settlement.
политического регулирования.
We said, all right, agreed, let's do it this way.
Сделаем.
As the Americans requested, Yanukovych did use neither the armed forces nor the police, yet the armed opposition committed a coup in Kiev.
Провела госпереворот.
What is that supposed to mean?
Как это понимать?
Who do you think you are?
Вы кто такие?
I wanted to ask the then US leadership.
Соединенные Штаты.
With the backing of whom?
При поддержке ЦРУ, конечно.
With the backing of CIA, of course.
Которые, как я понимаю,
The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand.
хотя это серьезная организация.
We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand. My former vis-a-vis in the sense that I served in the first main directorate, Soviet Union's intelligence service.
Оппонентами все.
They have always been our opponents. A job is a job.
Alright, look.
Технически
I
они
ain't
все
gonna watch
сделали
no more of
правильно.
this shit.
Technically, they did everything
I'ma
right.
pause
They
X on the
achieved their
stream
goal
and
of
we gonna
changing
bring
the
it back
government. However,
here in